Your defensive depth is more important than you think. It can actually change the way you defend in an instance. However, there are many things that we need to focus. Dylan Banks, who is a fellow YouTuber, made a video regarding this a few weeks ago, and it was brought to my attention, right? And I believe it is a very crucial point that I have been talking about during my custom tactic videos, but it deserves a separate video because I have not covered it before. And like I said, it can take your defending to that next level. Maybe it is the missing piece in the puzzle, given that all other boxes are checked. Other boxes meaning that you know how to defend, you know when to jockey, you know when to offside trap, you know all the basics of defending. If I sit here and tell you that, guys, the higher the depth is, the better it is going to be for you, then I am wrong. You can put your depth as higher as 100, right? So if you're the best player in the world, does it mean that you're going to use 100 depth? Obviously not, right? So that is something that we can never say. However, there are many factors that we need to consider according to our gameplay and the opponent we are playing in that specific game, which determines the best defensive depth. So after following this video, you will be able to come to a definitive conclusion. For the past 1.5 months, I have been using 71 depth. 71 depth is something that almost everyone was using when FC24 first dropped, as we remember. Because when you put your depth higher than 44, what happens is that auto overload ball side comes in and team does an auto press. When you put it higher than 70, the team does auto press plus auto offside trap. That makes it very suffocating for your opponent to build up because you're constantly pressing him, the AI is constantly pressing him, there is an auto overload ball side, and you won't lose as much stamina, and you're also doing auto offside traps, which made 71 depth almost unbeatable. However, EA highly nerfed the auto press, and then people went back to using their own preferred depth. Now, many people say that, okay, you should use 44 depth on a defensive tactic because see, when you put it 44, what happens is that there is no auto press anymore. Your team stays in shape. They're not going to do auto overload ball side, and your team will maintain more shape. So some coaches recommend and some YouTubers recommend that if you aren't a very good player, then you should put it to 44 because then your team will not be out of position. Because it will not be out of position, in return, you'll be able to defend better because again, you don't have to switch as much, you don't have to switch quickly enough, and it will just give you a better defense. Is that true? It depends. Do I recommend it? No. Why don't I recommend it, guys? Because when you put it 44, your team is actually very static. There is no press at all. So if you're someone who doesn't know how to switch, that also means you lack the ability to manually press. And when you lack the ability to manually press, what happens? You're giving the opponent too much time on the ball. And if you will give him too much time on the ball, he will easily build up. Even if he is a half decent player, if he is an above average player or even an average player, then you will struggle. Many times when I was playing the game, I was defending well in higher depths and I would put it back to 44 thinking that okay, I'm leading by 2 goals. I should go to a more passive formation, to a 4-2-3-1, put 44 depth, team will stay in its shape. What happens then? I invite too much pressure. Because I invite too much pressure, the opponent easily scores on me and suddenly I have lost the 2-0 lead. This is why it is often said that do not change your custom tactics too much when you are winning. You can change the formation, but don't touch the tactics too much. Defensive tactics, especially. Obviously, offensive tactics, it makes sense to put players in the box to 1. It makes sense to increase your attacking width. It makes sense to put long ball or balance, right? It makes sense. But with the defensive depth, you need to be careful. Then there is a middle ground, which is using something between 55 to 65 depth, or you can even say 55 to 69 depth. Like I said, when you put your depth higher than 45, you will still have some sort of auto press. Whenever you go higher than 44, auto press, auto overload ball side gets activated. The higher this number is, the more aggressive the press will be, the more aggressive the overload ball side will be. All right. So if I put it 60, more aggressive than it would be on 55, and so on and so forth. Just what happens is when you put it to 71, auto offside traps come in. So what depth should you use? It totally depends on you. Let me take you to the gameplay first. This is a weekend league game and I am on plus 15 elo, the highest elo you can get. So the opponent must be decent, right? And I am using 71 depth. What I thought to myself during this week is that 71 depth is leaving too much gaps in defense, right? and most of my opponents were abusing lobbed through passes, long through passes, ground through passes, you name it. In many games, I put my depth down to 65, 68, 67, just so that I still have a higher line, but I don't want that aggressive auto offside trap. I don't want my team to literally stand at the half line because then I was leaving too much space in behind. I was changing it depending on my opponents. But often games I was playing players who weren't very good and they were struggling because of the auto press. It made it so suffocating for them that they didn't know what they should do. So if I come here and tell you the higher the depth is, the better it is, then I am totally wrong. It totally depends on two things. Number one, your defensive skill. Your defensive skill is solely determined by you. You have to be honest with yourself and you need to know, can you switch quick enough? Do you understand switching? Mechanically switching quick enough is one thing, and understanding how to switch in the game is another thing. If you believe that you know both of these things and you understand the game really well as you have some sort of anticipation skill, then that means you can go to a higher depth. The most high depth I recommend is 71 depth. Is it the best depth? I don't think so it is the best. Lately, I felt that it has gotten a little bit nerfed and the team acts very silly. The auto offside traps aren't as accurate. I don't know why, if it's just me, but that's how I've been feeling since the past 2 weeks. Even though I still got the best rank possible in the weekend league during the past 2 weeks with the same 71 depth. However, I believe 69 depth is the best of the both worlds right now because again, you don't get that aggressive auto offside trap. You still have the auto press, and at the same time, you don't have your team literally sitting at the halfway line as it would on 71 depth. But am I telling you to use 71 depth? No. Again, the best depth for most players out there is between 55 to 65. Even if you're an average player, do not use 44 depth because it will make your team too static. It might work against someone who doesn't know how to attack, who doesn't know how to play, who is playing like, I don't know, who's an old man and he just doesn't know how to play, right? Might work against them. By old man, I don't mean like age-wise old, I'm just meant reaction-wise, right? I know many old players who are very good at the game. Like you can see, I'm using 71 depth, switching fast enough, switching quick enough, but still there were spaces being left behind. And many times it was because of how high my defensive line was. So I would simply pause the game. After pausing the game, I would just lower the depth to the point where it doesn't do auto offside traps. You need anticipation and understanding of the game. You need to be able to read the opponent. If he is playing too many through balls behind and they are getting in behind, even if you are switching perfectly fine, even if you're tracking the runs, but still there is too much space, that is a sign that you should lower the depth. If you feel that the opponent is building up very easily, he is attacking your goal constantly without any sort of pressure from the AI, that is a sign to increase the defensive depth. Alright, another sign of low depth is if your opponent is getting too much free space to take long shots, to take finish shots, and he is abusing them, then you should increase your depth. Alright, if you're not having too many counter attacks in the game, that is also a sign that your depth needs to change. If your opponent is actually countering you too much, that means that you need to lower your depth. These are basic football terms, basic football understanding that almost every one of you has, but it just gets absent when you're playing this game. Yes, this game isn't a very good football simulator, but still the basics of football actually apply to this game as well. There isn't something set in stone. In this game, 2 plus 2 isn't equal to 4. You need to realize that. So you have to be honest with yourself, understand how depth works, understand your current skill level, understand the skill of anticipation. Once these 4 boxes are checked, you'll be able to determine the best possible depth for you and then be able to change it according to your opponent in the game as well. Now you might be wondering, King Sunny, what are your custom tactics that you are using in the weekend league? Then check this video out here.